think we are good to go. So there's obviously, all sorts of selfish reasons why I've got you here today. But one is definitely that, look, I haven't been sleeping. I haven't been eating. This doesn't have anything to do with drugs and alcohol. This has everything to do with I've been writing, and I've been absolutely obsessed with my own story. I tried to stop myself. I was watching a movie. Hour and a half into a 2-hour movie, I realized I had no idea what was going on with the movie. But I did definitely have a whole bunch of ideas for rewriting a bunch of paragraphs and chapters and stuff in my book. So I need help, Niels, and that's why I brought you help me. Go.
I'm here to jiggle your brain. Is that it?
Well, just tell me how to deal with this. I mean, you've been there. I know you've been there.
Well, I've been there, and I do exactly the same that you do. Like, I can be watching TV and I'm like, an hour later, I got no freaking clue what's going on. Like, yeah, I mean, that happens to me too. And I mean, when you're in the creative process, it's a wonderful place to be, isn't it?
Absolutely. I'm not really complaining. Not really complaining. I just thought maybe you'd have some tips to shut it off once in a while. I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm not meant to be honest. It's this what I was working on in particular, because I'm writing like 3 different things. But this book in particular, I hadn't been writing for a while. I kind of felt like when it started to snow, I'd start writing. That's kind of, more or less what happened. It started to get cold and I could feel snow coming. And I started to get back into it. And then the snow fell and I went like a madman. It was just like this chemical reaction went off.
So what's this one about?
Well, this particular one, I've created a character that is kind of like a combination of Dexter and the vampire Lestat. So if you imagine kind of the basic premise of Dexter, where he's killing other killers, there's more to it than that. But also he has the kind of, telekinetic psychic abilities that one of Anne Rice's vampires might have. So helps to spruce up the killings, if you will. So it's been a fun way. There's a lot of horror to it, but I'm also trying to tell like a bigger story and incorporate some of the research that I've done into like narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths as well into it as I go. So the last night it was kind of wrapping up one of the characters that my main character ends up stalking and killing. And I became obsessed with it, ended up writing a whole extra chapter that I never had planned. And that's my life, man. So that's how I'm dealing with the clown show. How about yourself?
Well, my problem is I'm more obsessed with the actual clown show. Having already written 2 books that are kind of apocalyptic in nature and post-apocalyptic, I got so drawn in when this whole COVID thing started. I was glued to the news cycle because I just couldn't believe absurdity after absurdity after absurdity that would just keep. And it was like, wow, this is way different than I imagined any apocalypse to be. Like it actually kind of sucks when you go through it. And I thought the apocalypse was going to be great fun, all this revealing and stuff. But no, it's quite frustrating. And I can't tear myself away from that, which, God, growing up, I was such not a news guy. I knew nothing about politics. And even though now I feel that politics has got to be the lowest level grift going on earth to everyone, and everyone's falling for the lowest level con that there's ever been. It's so crazy. And yet here I am following every little detail, and I don't know, I'm obsessed with that. So I'm obviously not the right guy to rescue you, but we'll just talk, and that's what people do, is they just have conversations, and things are accomplished in conversation. Important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so for sake of conversation and for sake of censorship, on this podcast, I have this little game I like to play where we call this current affliction going around the joy. So you can catch the joy, you can spread the joy. The joy may have been created in a lab. The joy may not even exist, but the joy. And then there's the one solution, which we're going to call the lollipop. And then there's people who prefer to remain sugar-free. And I think if we stick to at least those, any of the other like words or names that come up, we're probably still okay. But the show is not medical advice, as a full disclaimer, before we go any further. And just opinion, just a couple people talking. But I think it's important. That's what this podcast is all about. That's why I asked you to be on it. Is I look at it as a library of people. We've all kind of got this story, and I think that our stories and kind of listening to each other's stories at this point in time in human history is going to really help us as we move forward through this, because a lot of things are changing in a hurry. And this aspect of having conversations, I mean, this is as face to face as we can be, being in that we're in two different parts of Canada, but having these conversations is something that we could potentially start to lose moving through with all of these new technologies and some things going on in our world, which I'm sure we'll get through. But yeah, I mean, the joy hit and everyone kind of had this reaction to it. We didn't really know what was going on. As soon as we kind of started to clue into what was going on, that reaction started to change, and it kind of, everyone handled it in their own way. Some of us kind of, got scared and put our head between our legs, and some of us started really taking a look at it, and some of us just went on about life. And as well as like some of us started making life changes, and some of us started following down paths that we had already kind of established for ourselves that may or not be healthy. I personally kind of looked at it as an opportunity to kind of reassess my viewpoint on everything. It gave me that quiet to do so, which was nice. And also coincided with, I was planning on starting to write. So it gave me lots of time for that. But I definitely, I was also working at a long-term care facility and frontline worker and all of that type of thing, right? So it was an interesting kind of, to watch the fear, I guess, was really interesting for me, because I didn't feel it myself. Like I just I don't know, I've tried to stay healthy in life, and I don't really get sick. And once I kind of figured out what this was and how sick it got people and why it was getting people that sick and whatnot, I kind of just didn't really think too much of it. But then I was surrounded by it every day. Everyone's talking about the joy, and the lollipops are coming, and then the lollipops get here, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm wondering, because you're kind of in the middle of nowhere, right? So it's probably a very different experience. So what's it like when you don't have a city of 3 million people?
Well, the first part of it, I just kept going around for months and months saying, well, this doesn't affect my life at all. Once they started mandating masks at like our local grocery store, well, that was a bit inconvenient, but for the most part, locking down and restricting travel for me didn't really mean anything, because I just go to the forest every day and I do all my traveling out in the forest, and there's nobody out there to hassle me. And that's just something I do every day. So for the most part, it didn't affect me too much. But like I say, I found my own obsessions to get in on the game, with everyone else. But what I wanted to talk about is how the joy actually helped my own personal health situation. So there's a bit of irony there, in that I did in the last 4 years kind of go through a bit of a health crisis. So if we go back 5 years, for my 50th birthday, we did a band reunion. I got all the boys back. A couple live out on the coast. One of them lives in Kelowna now. So they all came here to where I live in Fairmont Hot Springs, and we did a reunion gig. And I looked at the pictures afterwards of myself, and I was like, wow, I'm really thick around the middle. I'm carrying a lot of extra weight. And it was kind of the first time in a long time that, okay, that's probably not good. But, I had already settled. I was 50 years old. I was settled into some pretty entrenched routines. I was comfortable with them, and there wasn't anything major facing me, so I could just carry on. Fast forward a year, in October of the next year, when I was 51, all of a sudden I started with it looked like stigmata were forming on my hands and the palms of my hands. I was like, oh, this is great. I'm not even religious, but you know, what the hell? Okay. So I got stigmata forming on my hands, but turns out it was just the start of psoriasis. And it just started in the middle of my palms and then just spread outward from there and basically just covered my hands front and back and between my fingers, especially. And as it got really bad, I couldn't basically use my hands for anything. I absolutely could not play guitar. So that was a major issue for me. I was like, I can't play guitar. Like, does this mean I never get to play guitar again? Like, because every time I even just made a fist, my fingers would crack and bleed, and I'd have lesions underneath the scabbing, and it was really quite horrible. And that was just the onset of winter when it started. And I have to chop my firewood every day. I'm not one of those guys that chops all the year's firewood and then stacks it and then just hauls it in. I keep it in huge rounds, and then each day as I need it, I chop it. Well, trying to chop firewood when your hands crack and bleed in making a fist was a bit of a challenge every day. So I did a lot of bleeding inside my work gloves. And it didn't take me long, a couple months, for me to think, this is unacceptable. I absolutely have to do something about this. This is absolutely affecting the quality of my life. I'm only 51 years old, for God's sake. This is crazy that I suddenly can't do the things I need to do and the things that I love to do. In retrospect, I'm very happy with my body choosing to have the psoriasis show up on my hands. That was the best idea my body ever had. It was like, let's get his attention. He's got to change some stuff because now he can't do some stuff. So, you know, hands, the things of doing, they were taken out of commission. So I had to do something about that. So it started a lot of research, but I have to admit, I watched a lot of videos on YouTube. YouTube is still good for stuff like that. So I quickly understood that psoriasis is an autoimmune disease, and autoimmune disease starts in the gut. It's basically leaky gut leads to a long-term leaky gut will lead to some sort of autoimmune dysfunction down the line. So I was like, okay, yeah, my digestion has not been great for years. I just kind of ignored it and, you know, just whatever. And so I knew I had to fix that. And the first thing that I looked at that really sounded like the right way to go was keto, the ketogenic diet. And so I immediately started that. And within 5 months, I dropped 45 pounds. I dropped all the extra weight I had. I was as skinny as I was when I was 16 years old. I weighed the same as when I was 16 years old. So at 51, I went back to 16. So that's pretty good in body mass index. I thought, yeah, that's not bad. But the psoriasis didn't go away just from changing my diet like that. There was a lot more stuff that I had to learn about. Vitamin D, critical. Magnesium, critical. These are things that most people in our society are deficient, not according to the daily recommended dosage per se. Like, you don't have to take very much vitamin D or get very much vitamin D from the sun to make sure you don't get rickets. But if you want your body to actually function at an optimal level and have decent immunity to all sorts of things, including respiratory joy, you need a whole lot more vitamin D. So I learned about that. And then vitamin D, you can't store and convert it into the active form unless you have adequate magnesium. 80% of our population is magnesium deficient. So I had to fix that too. And so there's a long list of nutrients that I learned about and what I needed to do. And the other things was I started cutting out some of my bad habits. One critical bad habit that I had to stop was daily alcohol consumption. I a drinker per se. Like I hardly ever got drunk anymore for years, you know, maybe once or twice a year I'd actually tie one on and get drunk with my friends. But I was consistently having one or two drinks every evening. Like, and it was generally, I would eat my main meal of the day. Supper is always my main meal. It's always been that way for me. And then after supper, I would drink a couple of beers or maybe have a glass of scotch, something like that. And as I learned, that's exactly the wrong way. If you're going to have alcohol, when you have it after a meal, that just screws everything up. And that's because your liver has to deal with the alcohol because it turns to, what is it, the acetaldehyde or something like that. The super toxin that's going to kill you if your liver doesn't deal with it. So the liver, which is majorly involved in digestion, has to say, okay, stop all digestion. We can't do that right now. Stop. We have to deal with this poison over here. And, you know, so I was doing that every single day after my biggest meal of every day. So, I mean, something had to eventually catch up, and the psoriasis caught me up on that. So I did just quit. I quit drinking. Like for the first 3 years, so from age 51 to 54, I ended up having like maybe 30 alcoholic beverages in a 3-year span from having 2 every day. So I drastically cut down. I don't believe in cold turkey on anything. Like I kind of have an issue with alcoholics that say they've beaten alcohol, but they're in a point where they can't touch a drop, or they might fall off the wagon and go on a bender. It's like, well, no, alcohol's still winning that contest in my book. That's not actually beating alcohol. That's alcohol still calling the shots, but you're just backing off and staying away from it. So I've never been the sharp lines on things. You know, I'll still have the occasional drink. Like when I get together with family, we'll have some beers with the nephews. You know, that's what you do, right? So another big one was up until age 51, I was pretty much smoking pot every day too. I had been a chronic, you know, I was in a band from age 30 to 35-ish, that era of my life. And, you know, that's when I started smoking pot every day, and I just kept it on going. It was part of my habit routine. And I noticed when the psoriasis started getting better, when I was on the ketogenic diet, that the smoking of pot could itself cause a flare up. You know, things are going good, it's getting better, it's starting to heal. And then I get high and it's like, oh, my hands are itchy and dry, and oh shit, this is not the right thing to do. So I had to cut that out too. And that I cut down from 2 or 3 joints a day to 2 or 3 joints a month. That's kind of where I settled, and that was okay. Oh, and the other thing with the ketogenic diet is that for years and years and years, every Sunday I go to my parents' house, my elderly parents. My mom's 82, my dad's 87. They just live 5 minutes down the highway from me. So every Sunday I go have lunch with them, and mom makes lunch because mom makes great lunch. And there was no way I was going to say, well, here's the short list of the things I can eat, Mom. It was like, no, okay, Sundays, I'll just, whatever I'm served, I'm eating that. And as I learned more about the ketogenic diet, that's actually a better way to go, is to come out of ketosis on a fairly regular basis, you know, go into ketosis, burn fat, have some carbs, get out of ketosis, and then go back in. So it was basically 1 day a week I was burning carbs, glucose for fuel, but 6 days a week I was full keto, and half of my calories came from my coffee every day. That was my secret weapon. I love coffee, so it worked really well for me when I learned about bulletproof coffee, where you add a whole bunch of fat into your coffee. Loved it. I have morning coffee, I have 2 cups. Afternoon coffee, I have 2 cups. That's kind of my habit, and I love it. That's the way I do it. So when I make 2 cups of coffee, I'm using, you know, almost an ounce of cream, the heaviest fat cream I can find in the store. And they brought in this great stuff that was 38% fat. That's the highest I've ever seen. Awesome stuff. So I put lots of that in. Then I add a tablespoon of coconut oil and a tablespoon of ghee or butter, depending how rich I'm feeling. And and then whip that all up in the blender with the coffee. What a delicious thing. But I mean, you're talking at least 300 calories per cup of coffee. So now coffee had almost nothing to do with caffeine. I never had a huge reaction to caffeine in my life anyways. Caffeine does fuck all for me. But the 300 calories first thing in the morning, fat that your body can burn, no insulin response. So there's no insulin going on anywhere in your body. And if you want to lose weight, you have to stop insulin. If there's insulin circulating in your body, you're not losing weight. You can't have the two going on at the same time. So here was this thing that would, keep me satisfied till 6 p.m. So then I adopted the intermittent fasting idea where you just have a feeding window, so for me, it was like from about 4:30 p.m. till about 7:30 p.m. That's the only time I would eat, but I'd have coffee twice before that. So it was coffee and then my feeding window, and it worked really, really well. It was the psoriasis, and I was taking all my vitamin D and doing all that stuff. And the psoriasis was really going away. I was starting to become functional, but I still couldn't play guitar because the skin, when you're recovering from psoriasis, it feels really, really thin. It's very, very sensitive. It's like tissue paper skin. You need to aggressively play a guitar. If you don't play your guitar aggressively, you suck. So, so it was kind of frustrating. So it would have, so it started in October of 2017. And so I was going with it for a couple of years, and it was, by 2019, it was getting better, but never fully going away. It would get close to going away, and then I'd eat the wrong thing, and boom, it flares up again, and itchy hands, and shit, and it was getting frustrating. And then the joy came along. February of 2020, the joy came along. It started becoming a serious thing. People were talking about the joy. It was the talk of the town. And my first thought was, well, shit, I really don't want to get any kind of a sickness. The last thing I want to do is go out in public and start sneezing and coughing and having people stone me to death or whatever they're going to do, right? So I was going to do whatever it takes to make sure I don't get sick. And I don't usually get sick a whole lot anyways. It's usually a cold. It lasts 3 to 5 days, once every 3 years. But I was like, well, it's not going to happen now because that's not going to be a good scene if that happens. So I started implementing knowledge that I've had for a long, long time, and that's about vitamin C. And I was very familiar with Linus Pauling's original research on vitamin C, for which he won the Nobel Prize in Science way back in, I don't know, it was probably the 30s. It was a long, long time ago. And Linus Pauling lived into his mid-90s. And his daily recommendation for vitamin C is between 2 and 9 grams of vitamin C, pure ascorbic acid, every day. It's a fairly wide range, but that's 2,000 milligrams to 9,000 milligrams. The recommended daily allowance for vitamin C is 70 to 75, depending on whether you're a man or a woman, which is ridiculously low, which all those recommendations mean is that's what it takes to prevent scurvy. That's how much you need to prevent scurvy. You want anything above and beyond that? Well, you need a whole lot more. So I upped my game to about 5 to 10 grams a day. And I can tolerate 5 grams at a time. Not everybody can. Vitamin C has its own built-in fail-safe that if you take too much of it at once, you poop it right out. You don't pee it out. A lot of people think you pee it out. No, it makes you run to the bathroom and have the green apple splatters, get that out of there. So, I mean, I'm one of the people that can do 5 grams at a time. So I just have 2 doses a day. And I started doing that. And within, say, 2 weeks of starting that protocol in February of 2020, my psoriasis just went gone. And I was like, wow, it was like gone, not a trace. Okay, this is pretty cool. So I kept up the vitamin C. And I want to talk more about vitamin C because it's so important for so many things. And I think one of the things that was applicable to my situation is vitamin C's involvement with collagen. That's almost every BitChute channel that I watch is trying to sell me collagen before every video. You know, that happens all the time. BioTrust collagen. Everyone's trying to sell me that stuff. I did buy some collagen and I didn't find that it really did much for me. But then I learned that collagen requires vitamin C to be utilized in the body. If you don't have vitamin C, you can't produce collagen. You can't properly utilize collagen. It's dependent on vitamin C. That's one of those perks of vitamin C. You need a little extra for that. And all of a sudden, I didn't need to supplement with any collagen. There was no point. The vitamin C, you know, that's another common thing that you hear is that, oh, collagen production declines as you age. Well, my first question is always, why? And I learned because our vitamin C deficiency is catching up with us. Our body has to prioritize the little bit of vitamin C that we all do get. It has to say, okay, well, that's slotted for these essential functions, maybe some elastin for your arteries so you don't have inelastic arteries, hardening of the arteries and die of a heart attack, you know, so your body's going to prioritize. And collagen, well, that gets lower and lower on the list as you go along. So that was a good thing to learn. And that was the final piece of my puzzle, was the vitamin C thing. And I mean, there's so many other things that I learned along the way, but I thought it was really super ironic that the joy had to come along and force me into applying stuff I already knew. I knew that I should be doing this, but it was like, oh, now I got to do it. Okay. And that totally turned everything around. It's basically saved my quality of life. I mean, don't be too dramatic and say saved my life, but it saved the quality of my life. And everything's great now. Not a hint of psoriasis anywhere on my body. And at the time when it first cleared up, I said, okay, I'm only going to count myself cured once I've gone 2 years without any symptoms at all. And so this upcoming February, it'll be 2 years. I'm very, very confident that I will be able to declare myself cured of psoriasis. And from communicating with tons of people that have psoriasis, because when I do research and stuff, I make blog posts and talk to people online about, you know, what I'm learning and stuff. And I found out from psoriasis sufferers that they're like, well, you never really cure it. It kind of, you know, it dies down for a while and then it flares up and, you know, you never really cure it. And I was like, well, if I can be symptom free for 2 years, I think that's reasonable to call that a cure. So we're getting close to that. Really happy about it. But the health journey is fun. I'm only ever happy when I'm learning something new. So, you know, that was a project that was super meaningful. It was like, I have to get to the bottom of this or else, you know, there was no or else. It was just like, I have to get to the bottom of this. I have to fix this problem. I will not live with it. And it was wonderful. And at no point did I ever consider consulting an allopathic doctor and getting a prescription for anything. That was never a consideration. And I should add that at 55 years old, I have never, as an adult, had a prescription medication in my life.
Impressive.
Yeah, that's
well, a lot of that has to do with your lifestyle, like what you do day to day, right? And I want to get to that eventually, but you know, every superhero has his origin story. So I'm wondering if you could tell us ours, or tell us yours a little bit, kind of what From the day you were conceived right up until yesterday is what I want to know, and do not leave out any details, or I will be fucking mad. No kidding.
Yeah, that's not too tall an order there.
But something in that ballpark, there's obviously a lot of fundamental things that have led you to where you're at today, and halfway to 100 years old is no easy task these days, right? So
Yeah, and I don't see 100 being out of reach at all. Like that seems pretty reasonable. The way that I feel, I'm not going to bullshit you and say I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm not in the best shape of my life in terms of athletic achievement. I couldn't go out and ride my mountain bike for 5 hours up a mountain right now. Couldn't do that. Could do that in my youth. But I'm in the best overall health of my life. It's and that's nice. But essential to that is being close to nature. I would not have maintained my sanity or maybe even my will to live had I not decided to move out of Calgary. So I grew up in Calgary in the suburbs in the Northwest during the 70s. And that wasn't too bad. Honestly, growing up in the Calgary suburbs in the 70s was pretty cool. We had a lot of freedom. We rode our bikes everywhere. We were outside. If we were playing outside, nobody hassled us and nobody cared what we were doing, really. We were good kids, just, stirring up the neighborhood. And that was good. But once I was done with school, I tried university and said, well, this isn't for me. Originally, I was going to get my teaching degree, Bachelor of Ed, teach maybe middle school, maybe high school, something like that. I thought English was probably where I would wind up. But by the time it got to my practicum year, I had to have a moment of self-honesty and say, can I really see myself as a mouthpiece for the public school system? I mean, I wasn't into any conspiracy theories or anything, but I just knew that there's something off about the world that we've built for ourselves. The artificial human world, it just doesn't feel right. And I don't want to be the guy who's helping to prop it up. And in later years, I would start referring to the establishment as the world devouring machine. That was my phrase. I don't want to be, contributing to the world devouring machine. So practicum year came and I said, no, I'm out. I can't do this. I can't teach your curriculum. And shortly after that, I learned that I'm not as much about teaching as I am about learning. But then I found that they kind of go hand in hand. Once you learn a bunch of stuff and you think it's really cool, then you want to teach it. That's why I'm talking to you about what I'm talking to you about. So, yeah. So anyways, eventually in my early 20s, I figured out that nature provides endless learning. Like I can go out and walk the same forest trails day after day. I can literally walk them thousands of times and discover something new every single time I go. Well, maybe that's only true in the summertime. In the winter, it's pretty much the same. Walking through the snow when the snow is like 3 or 4 feet deep. Yeah, okay, there's not huge variety there. But in the summertime, there's always something new to see, to learn. Yeah, so endless exploration. Nature was the thing. I don't know why it took me so long to figure out, because when I dropped out of university, I wasn't a happy camper. I was like, well, what the hell am I going to do with my life? I'd been a straight A student through high school, got to university, and was like, I know all the things I don't want to be, but I don't really know what I'd actually like to do with my life. And due to parental and societal expectations, dropping out was not really considered a good option. So when I did drop out, I was the loser. I do remark to young people that, sometimes you might want to consider going to college or university just because of the way adults treat you. Like during those years when I'd meet new adults Oh, this is neat. Oh, what do you do? I go to university. Oh, good for you. I mean, as soon as you say, I go to university, you are the best person in the world. So, people, if you need, when you're young, that if you need a little boost, just go to university, or at least tell people that you do, and they will love you. But anyway, so I dropped out and didn't know what I was going to do, but I learned that learning was so essential to my life that I had to, whatever I did, I had to continue learning in order to be happy. If I didn't adopt a learning attitude, I have to learn something new every day, I don't think I could have ever had a happy life. Like, that's just been so central that I'm only happy if I'm learning. I have to be learning.
Yeah, there's a definite correlation between learning and teaching, and it goes both ways. First of all, what you said, like, once you learn something, you kind of want to share that with other people. You get you excited. You want to be like, guess what I've learned, guys? And then, try and spread the, I was going to say spread the joy, spread the love a bit. But there's also an aspect of, while you are teaching and you're breaking down the concepts and ideas for other people, you're also seeing it from a different angle. So you're teaching yourself that lesson in a different way as well. And you pick up things that maybe you missed along the way, or maybe just kind of overlooked the importance of. So totally get that.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, that only when you have to communicate it to someone else do you organize it all completely, put it all together, connect all of the dots, and then you really understand it once you can communicate it to someone else. So, and usually my method for that is writing books. I'm far more comfortable writing books than doing video chats, but I'll do them anyways, right? But yeah, I mean, I can put forward the teaching, I think, in a very organized, coherent way when I get to write it down. And I guess that's what I'm working on now. So if you ask, well, what have I been up to up until yesterday? Well, I'm working on a health book that, I mean, I conceived way back in my 30s, when I started just looking into a few health tidbits here and there. And of course, in my 30s, I was healthy, and I realized that, of course, nobody's interested in reading a book written by a 30-year-old about health. It's like, yeah, I was healthy at your age too. What the fuck, So I of course put it off. And now that I've gone through this thing where, I really had to put it all together and apply it to myself, and lo and behold, it frickin' worked. Like, holy shit, awesome. So, I mean, that's worth sharing. And so that will be hopefully coming out soon as I'm working on this book. But yeah, what else do we want to know?
Oh, all sorts of junk. all, all sorts
Okay,
of stuff.
so we'll go back to how I got here. Well, I love it here. So my town is, I don't know, in the winter time, it goes down to a population of, I don't know, it could be as low as 350 people live here permanently. I don't know. Maybe that's a bit too low, but it's pretty low. And then in the summertime, it gets up more around 1,000 people would be our peak capacity. But then there's hotels and motels and resorts and campgrounds and golf courses. And, we're a resort town, so we get overrun in the summertime. Not a big fan of that. Not a big fan of tourism. Tourism. There's a good topic. So, no, it is though. You'll like this. So I've been walking in the forest basically all my life. My parents, even when I was a little kid, we'd go hiking at Banff when we lived in Calgary, because it's an hour and a half drive away, go for a hike in Banff National Park. Did that all the time. So I've been out in the woods, hiking, camping, all that fun stuff all my life. But it was at the point when my previous dog, Jazz, when she died, I have a new dog, Sitka. She's already 8 years old. She's lying on the couch looking at me right now. But right at that time that I was between dogs, I think I was between dogs for 2 or 3 years, don't exactly remember. And I was out in the forest and I realized, you know what? I'm just a tourist here in the forest. I'm not really a part of the forest. You know, I come in, I observe some things, but I'm not really a participant in the forest life. I had that realization. It's because, you know, when you're out with your dog, any animal comes along, dog's going to chase it away, right? So you don't really interact with things. So I kind of spoke to the forest as though it was a conscious being and said, I would like to be a participant in the forest life. Since I'm here every day, I just want to take part in whatever goes on around here. And the forest seemed to agree to that immediately. Right when I spoke that proposition out to the forest, I got initiated like within a half hour of doing that. I was at my plantation site in the swamp, wink, wink, my plantation site. So I had my compost pile. It was spring at the time, and I just repile the compost every year. Been using the same compost pile for 34 or 35 years now out there in the swamp. But there was just kind of a root hanging out along the top of the compost pile that, oh, well, that's not rotting. So I just pull it out. But underneath that root, there was a wasp's nest that they were just getting started building their little hive inside the top of my compost pile. So I pulled the root and immediately got stung on the back of my hand. And it was like, oh, that's my initiation, you know, and I jumped back and I just got the one sting in the hand. And I thought, well, that's a decent initiation. Okay, I'm in. Right. That wasn't, you know, too painful. It went away about a half hour later, and then it just itches a while for the next day, right? So that wasn't too bad. My dog, when I got Sitka, well, okay, I should finish where I was going originally here. So for that next 2 years, having been initiated into the forest life, I had the most incredible interactions with animals out in the forest. I couldn't believe what was happening. Like at one point I was walking along a road, and the road kind of cut in a hillside. So on the bank above the road, there were 2 deer watching me walk along the road. And as I walked by them, they were only a few feet away from me, and they just watched me walk by. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to try and get my camera out of my bag and maybe take a picture of these deer. Not that deer are all that interesting, but since they're that close. And as I'm taking my pack off, one of the deer just lies right down in the moss. His buddy's standing beside him, but the other deer is in the moss. And I walk towards them, and they both just, yeah, whatever. They didn't care. So I hung out with these deer in the moss, and I was right. I didn't touch them. I didn't quite get that close, but I could have. They were just like, yeah, hey dude, how you doing? And I ended up not getting photos because I thought rooting around in my backpack would be a little bit too disturbing. I just paid attention to them. I had super close interactions with chipmunks. Chipmunk climbed up a tree right in front of my face. Like he was inches away from my face. And I was like, hey dude, how's it going? And when I spoke, he did start to shake and got a little bit scared, but I was like, it's all right, it's all right. And then I moved away, and he was fine. But let's see, there were wolves, there was a moose. I had my Sasquatch encounters during that time. It wasn't actually physical encounters with Sasquatch, but exchanges of signs and messages with Sasquatch. It started when I discovered these footprints that, you tell me what these are. And it was in pure mud. And it was like, and I posted pictures on Facebook and stuff. And, you know, other friends who are forestry related people, they're out in the forest just about as much as I am. And they look at them and go, no, that's just a large bear overlapping the front. And I'm like, no, it's not. Look closer. It's not. It's a single continuous footprint, no claws visible anywhere. And this was in mud. And the other really strange thing about that footprint was that it was a single footprint in a large area of just mud. I was like, well, how the hell do you do that? How do you leave one footprint in the middle of a patch of mud? So that was like, okay, so that's a magic trick right there. I've always thought that Sasquatch has got something going on anyways. And I was like, okay, you show me a bear that can do that. Bear always leave many footprints, not just one. So anyways, all those encounters, it was just incredible. And Sasquatch taught me about things that I could eat. I was into foraging. I was just starting to get into foraging at that time, learning more and more things that I can eat along the way. And one day I'm walking down by the river, and there's this one patch where this unique plant, I didn't know what it was at the time, but I learned afterwards that it's a false Solomon seal. So it's just a low-lying kind of vine-like thing with leaves that, I don't know, cross between spinach and plantain is what they look like. But one day I'm walking on this path by the river, and there's a bundle of these vines laid across the path, and a bit of a Sasquatch footprint by it. And I'm like, well, what the hell is this? And so I try eating one of the leaves because, I'm going to taste it. It's like, what is the message here? And I thought, well, maybe this is food. And I tasted it. And it was like, this is definitely food. It doesn't taste like arugula, but it's along those lines of having this really pungent, savory flavor that's good. And I was like, well, thanks, Sasquatch, for leaving me that. And then there was pollen cones from pine and fir trees. So that was another one where it was on a pine tree or a fir tree. There's usually about a single stalk that's about maybe a foot to a foot and a half at the top of the tree. So on trees that were like 12 feet tall at least, that top bit would be snapped off, and then several of them left again on my path. Like, I'm the only one that walks this path. Like, I'm talking about paths out in the forest that are basically game trails, but they become more path-like because I walk them every day. So they're my paths. And so these things are laid across the path, and they have pollen cones on them. So they're the smaller, fluffier looking cones. They're not like hard pine cones, and they're filled with pollen. If you tap them, this little powder comes out, and it kind of tastes like pine tree or fir tree, which is not an unpleasant flavor, but super healthy protein. And so I was taught about this as well. All these things I looked up and learned about afterwards, but it was an interesting thing, these exchanges with Sasquatch. And then finally, I got my new dog, Sitka. So she was joining me out there. The very first walk, I took her when she was still a puppy. She was still pretty small, but when they're puppies, they can't really do a long walk because they've just never done that before. It's maybe 2 hours. Once she was about 3 or 4 months old, she was just old enough where she could do a 2-hour walk out in the woods. So our very first walk out in the woods, and it was fall. I think it was November. Yeah, it was in the fall. We're walking along. We're kind of up on the plateau where we walk, and I'm hearing something in the distance. My little puppy's walking down by my feet. She's having a good old time. Hearing something in the distance. I'm like, what is that? It sounds like an owl. Way in the distance, an owl is hooting. I'm like, it's middle of the day. It's not likely to be an owl hooting. And then we keep walking. I keep hearing it. It keeps going and going. And it's like, oh, I know what that is. That's hounds barking. Further, I know what that means. That means there's a pack of hunting hounds that is currently chasing a cougar. And they're getting closer. And my thought was, I'm here with my little puppy. Do I want 10 or 12 hounds milling around my tiny little puppy here? That's what I was thinking, what I was concerned about. So we're walking, let's get out of here. Let's head toward the power line where things are open. And at one point, while we're in the thick of the forest, heading towards the power line, over this kind of rock thing in the forest, I catch something out of the corner of my eye, go right behind me, like within 3 or 4 feet behind me. And Sitka is walking behind me at that point. She yelps, is this the end? You know, it was just this desperate yelp. She just hits the dirt. I don't know if she got knocked or whether she just voluntarily went to the dirt, because the cougar that the dogs were chasing was what leapt over her and passed within 3 or 4 feet behind me. And then we watched it lope away. And there was a bit of snow on the ground at that time, because I remember measuring the span between its footprints, and it was doing these effortless bounds of 12 to 15 feet each one. Just, it was like, wow. And at that point, I was like, well, Sitka, there's your initiation. Welcome to the forest. And she was just scared, like, oh my God. These are the things out there. And for the rest of that walk, she walked right between my legs. Like I had to walk real funny, because she just didn't want to be anywhere else than between my legs or in my arms. That was the only 2 options at that point. So that was her initiation. So that's the forest stuff that it keeps me sane. That was my second mountain lion encounter. I'd already stared down one with my previous dog Jazz when I was living out in the cabin up in the woods. And I was just resupplying once a week. I would come out for a few hours, have my lunch with my parents, resupply, and go back living out in the woods. And so that was my first encounter with the mountain lion. And we met face to face. It was stalking my dog. I met up with it right. So my dog was bounding ahead through the snow, and me and the mountain lion met up in the early dawn hours where the light is just starting to come up. Middle of damn, my phone's ringing. Hopefully that stops.
You want to answer?
I don't. Oh, it's an 800 number. Who cares? That's got to be the credit card company asking me for money. It'll stop. You can hear that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
everybody should call that number right now.
Yeah, that was American Express. I recognized that number. Yeah. Anyways, so out in the woods, mountain lions. My first encounter with the mountain lion in the deep, deep snow. So the snow was up to my knees. It had all fallen during the night. It was my day to go back to my parents. It was Sunday. So we left as early as possible so that I wouldn't be super late for my parents, because they would get worried if I didn't show up on time. And it's hard to walk in snow that's up to your knees. Like that first day walking in deep, deep snow, it's like it takes way more energy to walk in snow than on flat ground. And then meeting up with the mountain lion. So it was just a few yards behind me. And I sensed something behind me as my dog is bounding up, having a great old time in the snow ahead of me. And I sensed there's something behind me. And I turn, and as soon as I turn, I can see this big shadow through the blizzard. It's still snowing, so it's hard to see. It's in the half light of dawn, and it's crouched down in the snow and immediately starts roaring at me over and over and over. And it's that very distinctive mountain lion roar that I can't imitate, but you can't mistake it. And I'm 10 to 15 yards away from it going, holy shit. And it's moments like that that I super treasure in my life, because going into that moment, when I thought about, if I ever encounter a mountain lion, I'm probably going to be dead. Here I am in that situation. And my first thought is, I'm not about to die. I mean, all the hair is standing up on the back of my neck. I'm super alert. But as I'm assessing myself, I'm like, I didn't shit my pants. I didn't pee my pants. I'm not actually afraid. I'm just super alert. And I know what's going on here. And I didn't really think about what I was doing. I just whistled for my dog, gave her the whistle that says, get over here now, please. You know, I have a special whistle that means that. And she comes bounding over the snow. And as soon as she comes back into sight, the mountain lion shuts up, stops roaring. My dog doesn't even know what's going on. She's like, hey, Dad, what's going on? Come on, let's go, let's go. And I was like, okay, it stopped roaring. I'm out of here, turned around and left, because you really shouldn't turn your back on a mountain lion. But I kind of got the feeling from that situation that the mountain lion was saying, oh, you're with the dog's with you. Damn, I thought that was my breakfast. Okay. You know, that the mountain lion kind of put two and two together. You two are together. Okay, I'll leave you alone. And that was that. And we got out of there. And then when I measured the paw prints afterwards, we came back that afternoon, because that's where I was living at the time. I had to go back to the same place because that's where I lived, in the middle of nowhere. And as I placed my hands, which are big hands, into the paw print was bigger than my hands. I was like, holy shit. I'm glad I couldn't see that lion clearly. And for weeks afterwards, that winter, that particular mountain lion followed us on several occasions. Later on, I had my cross-country skis with me, and we would ski out, and then I would ski back on the same track, just because it's nicer to ski on a track than always in super deep snow. And usually when I skied out and then came back, I'd only go back a little ways, and it's like, oh, there's the mountain lion's footprints. He was following us again, and he did that for weeks on end, but never saw him again. But yeah, he just made sure to let us know I'm in the area. So
I'm here.
And those kinds of experiences to face, I mean, at that time, I've had 600 bear encounters. Bears is like, yeah, whatever, bears, schmares. What day goes by, I don't bear, right? But the mountain lion, I honestly had some fear until I had the encounter. And then it was like, yeah, I'm not actually scared. And then I had the third encounter, which was with Sitka again. She's wandered off now. We were out one day. It was only a couple of years ago. And we were just about to the power line where things are open up. It's kind of open fields where the power lines are. But just before we got there, we saw a footprint in the mud. And it was a medium-sized footprint. And I thought, oh, okay, medium-sized black bear. Had I counted the toes, I would have known that it was actually a cougar print, because cougars have 4 toes up front. Black bear has 5. So that's the way to tell it apart quite easily. But I just glanced at it, medium-sized, and even said it aloud to Sitka. I said, hey, be on the lookout for a medium-sized bear. And she's already hackles up because she smells there's a predator in the area. Hackles are up. She's sniffing around everywhere. We get under the power line. She's up ahead of me. And this time she goes charging into the grass off to the right of the road. Tall grass. She goes charging in, immediately comes charging back out with a cougar right on her ass, yelping, yay, bye, bye, running as fast as she can. I'm, get over here, you idiot. And she's like, yeah, that was my plan. And she comes running straight at me. And as she's coming and the cougar notices that I'm there, it starts to to back off slowly, but it continues coming towards me. And at about 15 yards or so, I'm like, okay, I get really big and I make kind of a growling noise, and then it stops. And then we're staring at each other and we're staring at each other. And I'm like, well, this is great. And my dog's somewhere behind me, just kind of watching the whole procedure. And the only thing I could think to do was lunge at the cat. So that's what I did. I did a fake lunge towards it, and it took off. It went straight for the forest, for the trees. But of course, idiot says, "Oh, we're going to chase it now, Dad? All right, here we go." And she starts running after the cougar, and I'm like, "No, you idiot." And I'm just swearing my head off, running after my dog at top speed through the forest. "You fucking idiot, get back here, you stupid shithead." And eventually she came back, and, because I couldn't let my dog chase it. And then the cougar realizes, oh, this is just a dog chasing me. I'm going to get that thing now. Next day, I found out that the cougar was actually protecting a fresh kill of a deer. It had just killed the deer when we came on the site. So it wasn't actually hunting my dog. It was just chasing her away. So, but again, super interesting encounter. I knew I have to face this thing. There's no way that we can just try and slink away. And I don't know, it all worked out in the end. And I love stories like that. I like that I have these kinds of experiences in my life. Super intense when you're in them. They're super intense. But then it's afterward, you're like, that was really cool. That was really freaking cool. It's nice to have yourself tested in those ways that, no, I don't panic. No, I don't freak out. I'm not a complete idiot out in the forest, So it's nice to confirm that. You like to believe it, but having been a lifeguard for many, many years, you don't know how good a lifeguard you are until you're faced with having to save someone's life. And there have been many a lifeguard when I was working at the pool. I worked at the pools for 22 years. There was many a lifeguard that couldn't rise to the occasion. They froze up. They're like, oh, I can't do that. Well, okay, so you're not a lifeguard, but it's good to face those kinds of things. Super intense. I mean, as a lifeguard, it's not your life that's in jeopardy, but it is a life and death situation. Somebody's life is on the line.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I'm super thankful for those kinds of things. And the forest is my favorite place for those kinds of encounters. And like I say, 600 encounters with bears, many of them super close up. But I think black bear has to be my primary totem animal. I'm super curious. And if I have to pick one word to describe a black bear, it's curiosity. A grizzly, they're not that curious. They're kind of shy and to themselves. And they may raise their head to say, fuck off. And you go, yes, sir, and back away. But black bear, I would come screaming around a corner on my mountain bike, running down this mountain road, going super fast, and I have to slam on my brakes so I don't hit the black bear. Now, a black bear, he's going to take a few steps away. Well, what the hell was that? But he's going to stop. He's going to stand up. He might only be 8 feet away from me. He's like, hey, what you doing? What's going on? Black bear is just so completely different and so curious. I shared tea with one once. That was interesting, but she died, and that's why I did that. She had eaten something in our community down by Dutch Creek that she shouldn't have eaten, and she was labored breathing. I came across her in the forest. I was like, okay, wait here, I'll come back. And I made some tea and got a windbreaker because it was beside a pond. Mosquitoes were bad. It was in late May, bad time of year to be out at dusk. But I sat with her as long as I could. I actually petted that bear. And as I poured the tea, she was like, oh, what do you got there? What do you got there? Kind of tasting the air. And I was like, okay, you want some tea? She managed to actually sit up. So she was sitting on the ground, but upright with her front paws. And I just held out the cup of tea to her. I'm calling her because I decided afterwards that it was a female. I don't know for sure, but I felt female energy. handed her the cup. She took it between her paws, managed to spill most of it as she was trying to lick it out of the cup. But it was kind of a cool moment. And then I did have to leave shortly after that because the mosquitoes were just terrible. And I left and came back early the next morning and she was dead, as I suspected she would be. But I didn't poison her with the tea. I swear to God.
I believe you. I believe you.
Okay.
There's just something about the way nature works, and they have their ecosystem, and there's like a kind of harmony that goes on, like a symphony, if you will, of different sounds and whatnot. When we kind of enter their space, we're kind of messing with their music, so to speak. And it's not until we spend some time there and learn how to sing in harmony with them that we kind of get accepted. But once you do get accepted, a lot of magical moments start to happen. I remember going like 14 days out into the bush, and by like day 3, there's like first 2 days you're like, is there anything? Like, I'm pretty deep in the woods, how come I'm like not seeing anything? Well, because they see you miles away, and they're getting out of there because they can tell like that person's not supposed to be here yet. But as you adjust to their frequency, then they'll start coming around and poking their head out and being like, you good over there, bro? All right, and then do their thing. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that prolonged time out in it. People go camping on a weekend or something, and sleep under the stars for a night and say that they've done it. But acclimatizing yourself to their vibration, their frequency, coming in harmony with them, a lot of magic can be discovered. And speaking of harmony, you've also been a musician for a long time, and recorded some music, and I'm pretty sure you did some touring, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm sure there's a couple good stories in there, but what was that experience like just as a whole?
One that I recommend to any young person, if you have the chance to be in an actual rock band and play gigs and tour a little bit, take it. You're not going to get rich. You're not going to get famous. A lot of it's going to suck, but the experience is so revealing to human interaction. When you're like, I had the pleasure of being in a band where every member was super creative. Every single member of my band wrote songs. So we were all right in the songwriting department. We wanted to just play original music, but we were playing a lot of bars, and people in bars don't want to hear original music. Like, you people suck, but that's just, and they're going to sit there in their bar stool and they're going to yell, play some AC/DC. You're just like, fuck. But just learning to be with your bandmates, they become a second family. It's you against the world. Like, we played some kick-ass gigs in hostile territory. I remember one gig in Pincher Creek. The bar was half filled with natives and the rest of the people were white. And they didn't care about the band one little bit. We kept playing original music. We were off to the side of the bar, and we were so thoroughly ignored for a bar that was actually fairly crowded. We were astounded at how ignored we could be. And that's when I really understood that people that go to the bar, like that bar in particular, in that place in Pincher Creek, southern Alberta, which is pretty redneck territory, in case you don't know. Those people, they're going to the bar, 1, to get shit-faced, 2, to get laid. And if the band isn't going to help them by playing something familiar so that they can dance to it and help them get laid, they don't give a shit about the band one little bit. But bottom line of that one is that we played awesome. And we were so happy after that gig. We were like, shit, we were on fire. That was, everything just clicked. It was frickin', we played the perfect gig and nobody else noticed. Only the band knew that. Not a single other person knew that we'd even done anything. They didn't know we were there. It was, that was a good time there. Band stories. Okay. Originally, when we started gigging, I could not drink any alcohol in the day of a gig, nor would I smoke any pot on the day of a gig. I was terrified. When the band started, I was absolutely terrified to be up on stage. And so I was like, okay, I'm absolutely going to be so sober. And that lasted for about a year. We toured for a good 6 years. But after the first year, it was like, the other guys would be, let's smoke a joint for the third set. Okay, so we'll get high for the third set. Do that a couple times. Soon it was my habit. I get high before every third set. And then we were replacing our drummer. That's a whole other story. Our paranoid schizophrenic drummer with a new guy that was coming from Vancouver. So we had a friend that was driving him from Vancouver to Nelson, which is a little over halfway to where we are in Fairmont. So we were like, well, we're playing a gig in Nelson. Bring Chris to Nelson and we'll take him the rest of the way and he'll be our new drummer. That gig, we were playing a place that we'd played a couple times in Nelson, it's a town that's about 5 hours away from us, but it was one that we would go back to as often as they wanted us back. So it kind of became a regular thing for us. But this was only maybe the third time we'd play Nelson. And I don't remember which bandmate of mine suggested it, but we had the opportunity to drop mushrooms. And I was really, really nervous about that. Like, okay, it's one thing to smoke a little pot and go on stage and play. That's no big deal. You're still even going to have your brain farts doing that. But I was like, really? Like, we're going to do a full blown, oh yeah, man, 3.5 grams each. And I was like, really? We're doing this? And
sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. And if you knew the town of Nelson, that's what Nelson is about. The vibe of Nelson is magic mushrooms. Like, it is just a magic mushroom town. It's filled with hippies and artsy type people. All of the hills around Nelson, everyone's growing pot. Back then it was still illegal, but I mean, the local economy was pot dependent, very much so. The police in Nelson, at no point would they ever hassle people for smoking pot in public or anything like that. The most they would do is if you were smoking dope on Main Street and the cops came by, they would just say, could you just go around the corner to the alley there, please? Sorry, my bad, sure. So that the town has that vibe anyways. And for some reason, my bandmates are far braver than I am. But I said, okay, if that's what we're doing, let's do it. I mean, I like a good mushroom trip. What the hell? But that's another one of those experiences where it sounds terrifying, and it is kind of terrifying to do it. But once you're doing it and you've done it, it's like, that was awesome. And what it really, really taught me as a musician, who I have to kind of think about what I'm doing as I play, or at least I thought I did. Don't think about what you're doing when you're on mushrooms. Like, if I thought about, what the hell song am I playing? If that thought entered my mind, it was like, just let that go. Just keep playing and listen. Just play and listen. You don't have to know what song you're playing. Your fingers know what they're doing. You don't have to know what the next line is going to be that's going to be sung. You don't have to figure out, is it a bridge or a chorus that comes up next? Don't think about anything. And it taught me the value of just, as a musician, you're there to listen to what you're doing. And we played great. We played great on mushrooms up until the point we couldn't anymore. I mean, eventually you get so freaking high that it's like, I have no interest in playing this instrument anymore. Let's go wander in the woods in the moonlight, which is, of course, what we did for the next 4 or 5 hours and watched the sunrise after that. We did that a couple times. There was another time in Banff at a really good venue in Banff that we were playing. It was during a time we had a problem with our lead guitar player. I'm the rhythm guitar player, and Corey the lead guitar player. He left us for a year because as an original band, we weren't really making enough money for him to pay his bills, but it had something to do with him drinking his share. He sometimes played gigs where he owed money at the end of it. We're all getting paid out. And then they go, oh, but Corey, your tab, you actually owe us $20, so that might have been his problem. But anyways, he left us for a year. So we ended up we thought we were going to break up at that point, but we were in contact with another guitar player who has made a living as a musician all of his adult life. He's a guitar player and he's really, really good. He's always made his living as a guitar player. And he was like, no, you guys aren't breaking up. I'm going to be your guitar player. I'm going to fill in for Corey. Teach me the songs. And we were like, huh, okay, let's do that. So after that year of having Russ step in for Corey, we were playing at Banff and all of our guitar players were there. Russ and Corey were there. So we kind of said, oh, let's have 3 guitars plus a bass in the band. And so that's what we did. Everybody was playing. And this is a substantial bar, the Rose and Crown. It's a good venue. It's a good gig to get in Banff, and it's hard to get good gigs in Banff. Banff is, a very competitive town. Every band that's in Western Canada wants to play in Banff. And man, we sucked the first set. And Russ was embarrassed to be on stage with us. He's like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? And we ended the first set just hanging our heads. Luckily, the bar wasn't very crowded at that point. So not too many people saw us totally sucking, but we sucked. Our timing was off. We were hitting bad notes, bad chords. It was just awful. And we all went down to the motorhome that was parked in front of the bar on the street. And I had in my little bag of tricks, because I was kind of into psychedelics by that point. This is a few years down the line. I had something called 5-MeO-DIPT, diisopropyl-tryptamine. So it's a legal analog of DMT, 5-MeO-DMT. Very powerful hallucinogenic, but this one was orally active, whereas DMT isn't orally active unless you take it with an MAO inhibitor, blah, 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 blah. So this thing, I'd never tried it before. I had bought this stuff online from a reputable company that used to sell this stuff. You can't get it anymore. But it was lab pure diisopropyl-tryptamine, 5-methoxyated version. And I had put the right amount in these little red capsules that I had, filled up the capsules. And after the first set, we were all gathered in the motorhome, hanging our heads in shame, going, what the fuck is wrong with us? And I pull out my little container with the pills in them, and I hold them out in my hand. I said, you guys want to take these? And with no hesitation whatsoever, every band member was like, yep. Just immediately popped them down. And then they asked afterwards, what was that? I was like, oh dear. I don't know what to tell you. I can tell you the chemical name, but I don't really know anything about it. We're going to have to see how this goes. It ended up being a lot like an acid trip, maybe not quite as visual as an acid trip, but the main feature was it lasted 12 hours. Like we were just high for the rest of the night. But second set, third set, we rocked. And Russ, who was the only one who didn't do the drug at that time, after the second set, he was like, whatever you guys took, that was awesome. Thanks. Let's keep going. And so that was another interesting moment.
Well, that one sounds like fun. What did that drug end up kind of feeling like? Like, what was it close to?
I'd say that it was close to an acid trip. It was just sans the visuals. There was not much visually going on with it, but the feeling was very much acid trip. Thinking was very askew, but apparently playing music was not a problem. It suddenly became much, much easier on this. It's kind of like when people do.
I had a chemist friend, and he made variations of LSD. that he was coming up with, and one of them he had called base. And what that one had done was it didn't give you, you know, when you take acid or any type of hallucinogenic, there's like kind of a physical element to it that's kind of where the trip's coming from. Like you feel like very kind of compelled in the direction of the drug. That wasn't there, but it would make you hallucinate. Like actually hallucinate. And it was an odd feeling because you weren't feeling like you were on any kind of drug. But then things would melt and like kaleidoscope patterns would happen out of nowhere, and you'd see trails and then like little cartoon chickens and things like that you'd catch out of the corner of your eye and be like, no, I couldn't have just seen that, right? But yeah, it's drugs are fun. Drugs are bad. Don't do drugs.
Bad, okay.
Drugs are bad. Don't do drugs. But and then
yeah, what you just saying there reminds me of a trip we did on something called 2CT7, another one of these experimental analogs that, you know, they're legal for a while, you can get them, and then they become illegal on the analog, you know, that gets listed as an analog of this illegal drug. Therefore, we can prosecute you if we want to. And so then it becomes much more difficult to get. But anyways, it's called 2CT7. I have no idea what that actually stands for. Not a clue. It was something in the phenethylamine family. And when we tried that, we were good at looking it up. Like at those times, it was the Vaults of Arrowwood was the online place to go to look up dosages on any drug you could name. That was always there. You know, what's the threshold dose? What's the average dose? What's a high dose? It tells you exactly in milligrams, and it would break everything down. So we took the prescribed amount for average dose. I usually take a little bit less myself because I'm actually kind of sensitive to psychedelics. But my friends, I did it with 2 friends, they took at least a full dose of the recommended average dose. And we neglected to really look at all the rest of the details of like onset, of how long it takes for the drug to actually start to get you high. That was a critical thing to know. Spoiler alert, it was 3 hours for the onset of the drug. So an hour and a half in, we're like, oh, this is nice. This is like a mild ecstasy trip. Awesome. Well, let's take some more. This is great. Sure. So we each took another full dose of what we had already done. And of course, hours later, we're just like, oh my God, it was the most visual drug I've ever done. And we were trying to watch some Japanese anime crazy cartoon at the time. But one peculiar feature of this drug was that no matter what position your body was in, it wasn't the right position. You just constantly felt that I'm not quite comfortable. I'm not quite comfortable. And we were just all fidgeting and twitching and trying to watch the TV. And there's like, oh, we better go for a walk. And that was no better. You still didn't feel comfortable even walking. It was like, I gotta walk differently or something. It was a very strange trip. Lasted way too long. Was super exhausted by the end of it because the visuals, intense visuals that went on for 5 or 6 or 7 hours even of nonstop visuals. That's way too much. You get exhausted. Your perceptive apparatus is just like burnt out. So I don't recommend doing that. If you ever get any 2CT7, just take the recommended dose and don't take any more.
Yeah, that's it. No thanks. I'm good.
Yeah,
well, you on the paleo diet, I was curious because I know that you forage for most of your food. So do you still, what percentage is that nowadays now that you're doing that? Like,
well, I don't forage for, I don't say I forage for most of my food. It's just that I do forage pretty much every single day. It's usually the first food that I eat in the day, the first solid food. So, you know, that's outside my eating window if I'm doing the intermittent fasting, whatever I forage out in the forest. I mean, I don't really count that. That's a whole other thing where, you know, I'm vibing with the forest, I'm ingesting its frequencies and trying to adjust to it. And And that's kind of what that's about. It's not really I'm filling my belly, although I have become quite aware of a lot of the nutrients that I am getting. One of the more recent things that I learned was that rose hips, which is pretty much one of the only things that's available right now at this time of year and will continue to be available throughout the winter. The hips just stay on the dead looking bushes, and rose bushes, wild rose bushes are everywhere out here. It's probably the most abundant plant out here. So I eat that, and I just recently found out that rose hips are specific NRF2 activators, which NRF2 is our endogenous antioxidant system. So by taking activators of that system, we increase our glutathione, superoxide dismutase, and catalase, and it really protects our mitochondria within the cells and all that good stuff, really good stuff to happen. So I'm just starting to learn what all my foraging is actually worth to my body. But, you know, I knew from eating it that you can tell, oh, this is doing me good. I don't know the mechanism necessarily of how it's doing me good, but I can feel that it is. But to return to, you were talking about us being in sync with the forest, vibed with the forest, the frequencies of nature. And I don't know if I ever talked to you about it before, but you're a musician and you may or may not be aware of how we came to settle on A440 as the standard concert tuning.
Yeah.
That was something determined back in, well, they started pushing it in 38 and then it was officially pushed in 39 once Hitler's propagandist Goebbels got involved. He managed to convince all the other nations that, no, we need to do this as a Rockefeller initiative. So, I mean, I was aware of that whole thing for a long time. And when I first looked into it, I thought the history was interesting, but I want to see, is there anything to this? Because, you know, I just took it for granted that 4/4 tuning, that's just, I don't know, somehow that's written into the cosmos and that's what it should be. That's what I had always assumed until I encountered this information. And then the first thing you find when you start looking into it is this alternate tuning that everyone calls 432. So you tune A to 432 down a little bit, right? 8 hertz from 440 to 432. And so I tried that on my guitar. I have a tuner that I can adjust the pitch slightly. And so for maybe a year and a half, I was playing guitar and singing to 432 tuning. And I thought, yeah, this is a little bit better. It's a little bit more comfortable. I kind of like it, but it wasn't anything profound. But just in the past couple of months, whenever that Travis Scott concert, Astro World, Travis Scott, Tavistock, that's a big coincidence for me. Travis Scott, Tavistock. Think about that one. Anyways, when that whole fiasco happened, I thought this is just a bizarre story, and the way people were describing the energy of the event, and I thought this is really weird. So I was actually clicking on a lot of videos that were about that whole event, and what I kept encountering was this idea of 741 hertz is the devil's tone. What the hell does that mean? So I started looking into that. I started researching, what is this 741 devil's tone? So then I came across the solfeggio frequencies, which are the 9 primal tones that supposedly our physical universe is constructed upon. That's the sound energy matrix that is the underlying construct of our universe, the 9 solfeggio tones. And 741 is one of them. And I didn't find any reason to call it the devil's tone. There's another tone called 528. Back when I was looking into 432 tuning, I kept encountering this 528. No, 432 is no good. You want 528. And I was like, 528? I can't tune my A string up to 528. It'll bust the damn thing. It'll bust all the strings of my guitar. Of course, that's not what it meant. And so, I mean, I dismissed it at that time. But when I looked into this 741 devil's tone, it's that tone, when it's played at the same time as a 528, they're in super dissonance, like it's really bad. And all it is on the guitar, when you have your guitar tuned properly to these tones, it's if you play a middle C and an F sharp at the same time. They just don't go together well at all. They don't play together nicely. They sound awful. So it's the devil's tone in opposition to the 528 tone. But looking into what I learned, okay, to get the 528 tone, which is that middle C, your guitar has to be actually tuned to 444. So you go up a tiny step, 0.909% on a pitch shifter. You go up to 444, as opposed to going 1.818% down to 432. So just for the last week, maybe two, I've had my guitar tuned to 444 and been singing all the songs that I sing, and I really like it. I really like it, which is a surprise because I didn't think I would want to be tuned up. Tuning down to 432 seemed like, oh, that would probably be more comfortable, and I thought it was more comfortable. So anyway, in my research, learning about all this stuff, what I learned is that, or how it appears, is that 432 is a limited hangout. It's kind of like the diversion. Once people realize that 440 is totally out of sync with nature, 432 is the compromise, the fallback position in the con. Oh, okay, herd everyone into the 432. That's the limited hangout psyop. Whereas actually 444, which they were calling 528 tuning, which is where I got confused, right? Like 528, how can that be a tuning? What are you talking about? When your A is tuned to 444, your C becomes 528 exactly, and it's all perfect. And I gotta say, for me, the proof is in the pudding. And when I sing, and it actually sounds better and makes me feel better, I'm not straining, I actually get in a better mood when I've got the right tuning. So there's something there. There is something there, and I'm exploring it now. So I'm really new to this whole tuning after, hanging out in 432 and going, yeah, this is slightly better, but no big deal. But this 444 thing seems to really matter, and I'm really liking it so far. And I would like to do some recordings, because I always have musicians passing through my life. One of my tenants right now, he used to be a tenant like 7 or 8 years ago. He's come back, and he's a multi-instrumentalist, but his primary instrument is the piano. And I've never recorded, well, except for the very, very first song we ever recorded, piano player put a piano track on it. But other than that, I've never played with a piano player, and I always wanted to. I have some really nice acoustic bits that I finger pick on my 12 string that with a good piano accompaniment would sound awesome. I have, several songs that just, they were never appropriate for a heavy jam and missing piece type band that I was before. But with this new piano player, so I'm hoping to get him in there. But unfortunately, his piano, of course, is electric. It's a full 88 key piano keyboard, but being electric, you can't just turn a knob and shift the pitch up to 444 tuning. We could run it through some software and do a pitch shift that way, and that would work, and that may be what we end up doing. But all of this, if it's as good as I think it is, maybe just having our bass frequencies tuned up to something that does harmonize with nature would just make the whole musical experience that much better. Because in regular 440 tuning, I strain to sing. I don't like singing in 440 tuning. Never have. And until I tried other tunings, I just assume I suck at singing, and but it just never felt right, natural. So I've been thinking a lot about it lately, that I spend so much time out in nature, and I entrain to those frequencies, right? So then if I come home and try and play guitar and sing to 440 tuning, I'm slightly off from, it's not harmonizing with those frequencies that I've just entrained my whole body to. And maybe that's a big reason why 440 tuning never ever felt right to me, especially in the singing. It's the singing thing It really
Yeah,
is.
I keep mine in 432. I just prefer it that way.
Yeah.
It would be an interesting experiment for you to go out into the woods for a day, come home with a guitar that's already out of tune, and just tune it completely by ear. And then with a tuner, figure out what you're closest to, whether you're closest to 440, 444, or 432, just to see like what your ear would naturally gravitate to. It would probably be somewhere in around that 444, I would imagine. Like I just have that intuition, let me say, about how that would work out.
I think
Because
so too.
yeah, and if you think about it, we've talked about it on this podcast before, actually, how back in the day, musicians would just meet up and one of them would tune by ear and the other one would tune relative to them, and you would play, right? And there was no, oh, my tuner says, so,
Yeah.
and I think that we might be missing an element of that. I remember someone telling me a story about how they practice snake charming, right? And obviously part of the snake charming comes from the movement that they're doing, but there's also part of it that comes from the song that they're playing. It's not necessarily the notes, it's the ways the notes that fit together in juxtaposition that disorient the snake and make them pay attention, right? But then they also talked about how you couldn't recreate that digitally. Like you played, even if you were still doing the movements and you just played the music in the background, it not coming from that flute, the snake could tell the difference and it didn't have the same effect on them, right? Then you get into like cymatics and how water is controlled or moved by sound, and think of the fact that we are mostly water, mostly fluid and plasma, right? So you can't tell me that it doesn't have an effect on us. Everyone can feel it when you're at a bar, or whether you're, even if a car drives by you on the street, if you're at a concert, if you're singing in the shower, you can feel that. And there's a difference in the resonance. One thing I always notice is kind of an anomaly with 432. Some guitars, when you're tuning, once you hit it, you'll realize that you hear the note and it's the proper note, but you also hear a harmonic coming like out of the resonance of the wood of the guitar, almost like the wood of the guitar is having a reaction to whatever frequency you're putting through it and creating its other note. It's like similar to what a polyphonic singer would do with their voice in what it sounds like. And so, there's a lot to consider when it comes to that. But we've kind of gone longer than I normally go with these things, and I feel like we could do probably a whole other round of what we just did again, because yeah, it's
Easy.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
easily we could.
I think I'll let you go for today at least. But I want to ask about the book that you're writing now and when you think it will be done and where people could look for it once it was.
Okay, so it's just a health book, strictly a health book. The things that I've learned, the things that helped me, I will explain my journey in it. Much of what I told you today, the story of what I went through, but then getting into all of the details of what I learned, and I've arranged it kind of into priorities. What I think are the priorities for the most people, but it's really hard to nail down. Well, these are the priorities for everyone. That can't happen. Um, Another thing that I've been into lately is breathing exercises. And I've learned that, if you're breathing incorrectly, if you're a mouth breather, and especially if you breathe through your mouth at night, I'm going to say that's your number one priority is change that, become a nasal breather. Like that would give the biggest health benefit of anything you could do. So, that would leap to I've always been a nose breather myself. So that wasn't a huge priority. But now that I've been doing breathing exercises for a year, I'm just loving it, and I see how great a benefit it is. And why the hell weren't we taught this in school, that breathing is actually important? Like, what the
We
hell
are in
were
a
we doing
derogatory
in school?
fashion, right? Because you can get called a mouth breather as an insult. So I mean, a derogatory fashion, it's been there, but yeah, they don't put any kind of. You would think that would be part of, say, like a phys ed, right?
Yeah, yeah, because it's stuff that's been known for thousands of years, right? It's not like this is mystery stuff. And so the book, I mean, I need to work on it really hard right now. And I have to do this now because I'm broke as fuck. I don't have any money left. I need to put a book out there that I think in this day and age of the joy is where we're going next. I'm very much thinking and hoping that the pharmaceutical paradigm is in its twilight years. I really hope so, that people are going to begin to see that, man, managing disease is nowhere near as good as curing disease. And that's why I think my story is pertinent, because I cured my disease. I know I don't get to say that until February officially, but damn it, I did. I cured my disease. I don't have any signs of psoriasis. And along the way, I cured a whole bunch of other stuff. So hopefully this book, or at least the first draft of it, within a month, get it out within a month. And my plan is to just put it online basically for free and just have like a PayPal donate button. If you find this to be of value to you, throw me a few bucks. That's it. Because it's the kind of information that when I did a lot of medical research throughout the years, I got annoyed when certain doctors would tell you so much. And then, oh, if you want to know the rest of the story on this, you have to subscribe to my newsletter or go behind a paywall. And it's like, grr, that pisses me off. Don't give me just half the story. I want the whole story, damn it. And when it comes to human health, this is something that should be as widely available as possible. So that's going to be my approach, is to just put it out there. I may even do a mass mailing through email, that everyone that's on my email list, here you go, here's a copy of the book. Again, there's just a donation button. If you want to pay me, pay me. If you don't, if it's nothing that you find of value, don't pay me. That's fine. It's all good. But I need to do something. I am broke. I've exhausted my government money, which all of my life until the joy came along, I had never collected welfare, never collected unemployment, ever. Never took anything from the government ever at all. Always paid my taxes. But then when this whole thing came along, I was like, well, the government fucked it all up. You know, our town is completely dead because of their policies. So damn right, I'm going to take their damn money. And I did for as long as I could. And now my benefits are exhausted. I'm done. So that's a good thing too, because it's going to force me to put this book out. So, you know.
Well, there you go. And I hope that works, because I mean, I meant to dig them out before we got here, but I definitely have a couple of your books in that pile right there. And you're definitely a gifted writer, and I would love to see you be able to, you know, start generating income again that way. It's using your creative self instead of you know, having to do something. Well, thankfully, you know, I mean, I won't speak for you. We haven't had to do too much that you don't want to do in order to earn a living in the world. But you know, living in a tourist place when there is no tourism in a country that isn't allowing travel is a bit of a problem. So best of luck to that. Thank you all very much for the stories. Maybe around February we'll have you back so we can celebrate the cure with you.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks for letting me talk so much. I mean, we went in a lot of different directions.
I loved it. Thank you. That's, you know, thank you for doing my job for me. It was beautiful. All right. People at home, I guess I'm supposed to say this because like you're supposed to promote your podcast. So if you enjoy these conversations, do all the things. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and tell all your friends, post it on your social media. Trying to grow this podcast, have as many of these conversations as we can. I think it's valuable for us all to get to talking. And if you would like to join me on one of these, all you need to do is reach out. This is an open door to everybody. So have a nice day and bye for now.
Bye.